The majority of crypto losses have nothing to do with market crashes and everything to do with taxes and poor asset management. Almost every new client we get is now committing one, or at least one, of these mistakes that I'm going to reveal to you in this video. And by the end of the video, you're going to know the mistakes that you're probably committing right now and the exact security protocols and setup we use for different portfolio sizes so that you can protect your crypto the same way our wealthiest clients do. The biggest threat to your crypto is not market crashes. Most often, it's people themselves. And it's them leaving themselves open to creditors, taxes, and hackers. And after watching countless investors make preventable mistakes that put their digital assets at risk, I'm going to show you the portfolio-specific protection strategies that can literally save you millions of dollars in the future, whether you're holding just $1,000 in crypto or hundreds of millions, plus some of the specifics that you can put in place right now, depending on your portfolio size. So let's start with just the mistakes that I see over and over and over again that can destroy your crypto wealth. First up is going to be leaving your stuff on exchanges. Using exchanges as long-term storage instead of just for trading. I treat exchanges like public restrooms, okay? You get in, you do your business, and you get out. You don't want to be caught in a situation like FT or Celsius or any of the other ones that went bankrupt back in 2021, or many of the other situations where your stuff just gets locked down. They won't let you have it. Keeping all your crypto on a single exchange creates massive single point of failure risk, okay? And believing they're too big to fail, even if it's Coinbase or Kraken or Uphold, if they're a multi-billion-dollar company, they can still collapse overnight. And understand, exchanges can freeze your account whenever they want. They can go offline, they can get hacked. There's all these things that have happened in the past, and many of them today have put things in place to mitigate those risks, but it's still possible. And you don't even own the crypto when it's on the exchange. They owe it back to you. You are a creditor of the exchange. It's not like a bank where they have FDIC insurance or traditional banking protections. Oftentimes, they don't even have custody separated from the trading. They pool your assets and they give you a tag number. Just like with your XRP, if you send it to a wallet, it's their wallet. And they use an internal counting infrastructure to be able to tell themselves how much they owe you back. Basically, again, you are a creditor. It's not your assets that are on these exchanges. It is theirs until you take it off there. So leaving your crypto on exchanges is irresponsible if you're going to be investing in this asset class. And during major market volatility, oftentimes they go down. Coinbase is notorious for this. You can't sell, you can't buy, you can't do any of the things that you even wanted to do and the reasons you left the crypto on there in the first place. So I'd highly recommend, if you're holding assets on exchanges, if it's on Robinhood, Webull, or anywhere else, to get your assets into something that you own and you have control of. Like many people say, not your keys, not your crypto. And that's really the second piece here that I find as the largest mistake that people make. And that is the mismanagement of their cold wallet solution, whatever that might be. It could be a Ledger, it could be Arculus, it could be Elipal, it could be Decent, it could be Trezor. It doesn't matter which one you hold it on. I mean, we'll talk about my recommendation later on, but the mismanagement of those keys, taking screenshots, which I see people do often, of the keys or holding it in a photo gallery on your phone or in your storage on your cloud, is you're just asking for somebody to hack you and recreate your wallet somewhere else and take your assets. Do not do it. The only can that you should have these in is in your mind. You memorize the seed phrases or you write it down on a piece of paper. Now, if it's on a piece of paper, it can be destroyed by a fire or a flood, or it could get thrown away by a family member. So oftentimes people use metal plates. We'll talk about those later also. I mean, but even those aren't like a fail-safe completely. We had the fires in California, and many of those got burnt up in the fire like a blowtorch on the metal. So you want to have redundancies built in. You don't want to be sharing these seed phrases with your family members who don't understand security protocols. If they figure this stuff out and they go take your stuff, which I've seen happen also, your stuff's gone again. So you really need to be able to trust the counterparty. You also want to decentralize the keys, right? So you might have two people that hold different pieces of the keys. Also, you want to test recreating the wallet. So, if you have a seed phrase and you haven't ever recovered the wallet before, I would encourage you, before you move any large amounts to it, to, close it out, log it off, remove it from whatever the device is, and then recreate it on the device to make sure that you are able to do so. and you understand how that process works. If you're storing your seed phrases in the same location as the hardware wallet, also a big no-no. If it's in your desk drawer, if it's in your safe, if they're right there next to one another, you want to have stuff diversified. You don't want all of the risk in a single point of failure where somebody can access everything in one place. You want, multiple places where you're holding this stuff away from the hardware wallet itself. And again, we'll get into some of the best practices around that later on in this video, if you'll stick around through the whole thing. The third thing that I see most frequently is people having problems with social engineering and privacy mistakes. Okay. They're posting their crypto holdings on social media platforms. Oftentimes we'll be on a live and people will be like, hey, I have this much of this asset, and it's their name as their YouTube handle. Please don't do that. Please don't tell other people how much you have or post it on social media. You're positioning yourself as a target. Also, if you're using the same email and the same passwords across multiple crypto services, another big no-no, because if they hack one, they'll be able to get into the others. And then, there are a lot of people that will reach out to you and act as if they are somebody from the exchange, or you need to update your wallet. Please don't fall for fake customer support representatives who are asking you for your private keys. Do not give your private keys to anybody. They are yours. Nobody's ever going to ask you for your private keys at, the wallet manufacturer or anybody else that's asking you to update the wallet, or even if you're on an exchange and a representative reach out to you, do not give them access to your computer through, remote access to be able to move things around for technical support. All of this just compromises you and is likely going to lose you your assets. Okay. Clicking on phishing links in emails. I see this happen all the time. People will think that they get an email from a support channel. Always check the email address that it actually came from, and not just what it says at the top of the email. If it's not directly from that company, and even if it is, it could be a scam. So make sure that, again, I wish there were more resources for people or standards in this industry, but it's still so nascent, and we haven't seen the adoption of the institutions at this point, really, providing this service for retail. And so until we do, you're just going to need to be extra diligent about this stuff. Don't give anybody your seed phrases. Do not interact with anybody that seems like they're trying to help you or update your stuff, or they will remote in and take your assets. I've seen it happen. There's also been, people at the exchanges that have been caught doing things that are not good. They have your account information. They seem like they're legitimate. Don't interact with these people. And I know that can be frustrating, but it will prevent you from losing your assets. And again, that's the reason I don't keep your stuff on an exchange and only, use a cold wallet solution or institutional custody, like we'll talk about later. One of the other huge pieces that I see people not using is two-factor authentication on their accounts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but setting it up makes a big difference in getting access to things. And you need that redundancy across devices when you're logging into something, and you'll get notified if somebody's trying to get in and, you're like, hey, what's going on here? I got notified that I should be logging into this, and it gave me a code, but now, I'm not doing it. And so it alerts you to when something bad is happening. If you are hacked, if you do lose your assets, if you are phished, if something like this happens, we have precautions set up for people there in the mastermind. We have a team on standby that can help you recover your assets. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you think that would be a benefit to you, you can always join the Beyond Broke Mastermind and use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO, get you the first month for $2 there in Carbon One, get you access to this team and would allow you to help recover your assets if a situation transpires. They've recovered over $8 million in assets for our clients and our members there in the mastermind. So if that sounds cool to you, again, we would love to have you there in the group and get you access to these resources to recover your assets. But you do need to act very quickly in that situation. And the longer you wait, the less likely they will be able to recover your stuff. The fourth thing that I see people do most often are technical security failures. Okay. They're using hot wallets for long-term storage instead of a cold wallet solution. There's been multiple hacks on Atomic and other platforms where people have lost assets. Again, anything connected to the internet consistently can be a problem. Ideally, you want a completely separate device, a laptop or computer that you only use for accessing your crypto. And, in correlation with your cold wallet, you have your own passwords, you have separated stuff. This can get as technical or not technical as most people do it. But the more technical you can make it and the more points of failure that would be required, in order for somebody to be able to get access to stuff, the better or more secure your assets are going to be. Something else that I see frequently is people not updating the firmware on their hardware wallets. And this is kind of a double-edged sword because with Ledger, there was potentially some issues that they were going to have with an update that people didn't really like. So for that device in particular, I've seen a lot of people postpone the updates to those devices because they're concerned about that. Again, that's why we recommend some other wallets other than Ledger. But using hardware wallets is great unless you have malware on your computer. Somebody has keystroke software installed on your device, and they're able to then, look at what you're doing and recreate that real time. If you had to put in your seed phrase or other passwords, they're able to see what you're doing. So again, this is another reason that you always want to separate the device that you're even logging into when you're using the cold wallet. When you're creating the cold wallet, you don't want to be connected to a public Wi-Fi network. That's also a problem. Somebody else could be monitoring that network when you're doing it. You want it to be a private network that you're connected to that has firewalls, and other things in place to be able to mitigate the risk that somebody is watching or being able to see those things that are going on. Another thing is not verifying receiving addresses before sending a large transaction. I have done this before, so I'm telling you with regret in my heart from it, please always send a small test transaction to the wallet that you're sending to. It doesn't take that much time. Most networks settle, fairly quickly, and you're able to see, that small amount land in this other wallet before you send a larger amount. And that's going to make sure that you don't send a large amount of money into the abyss, never to be returned. If you send it to the wrong wallet address or you send it to another network, it's gone for forever. So please make sure you're always sending small test transactions before sending large amounts or large transactions. The other thing that I see people do quite frequently, and a lot of people that we work with, is mixing their personal and investment crypto without proper documentation for taxes. If you're segregating stuff and you're managing it through a corporation, like we often suggest for people, you don't want to commingle assets. That's going to allow people to pierce the corporate veil. And you want to make sure that you have all of that documented when you're moving personal assets into a corporation or assets out of a corporation into your personal name, written actions, written consents, all the things that are required for that documentation to be presented in court to maintain that corporate veil and the creditor protection that you're going to get. The other thing I would say is a lot of people buy their hardware wallet off of a website that is not the manufacturer's website. Please don't do this. If you buy it off Amazon or somewhere else, it's possible that somebody has, created the keys on there or has a backdoor to that device. I've seen a lot of people lose assets because of that, and they don't lose it immediately. They will wait a while before they take your stuff, but they will take your stuff. So always order directly from the manufacturer on these hardware wallets. And again, you're taking radical responsibility here. There's no insurance on this. There's no recourse to the wallet manufacturer. If you do lose your assets, they are gone, and there's no way that you normally can recover them again, unless you're working with somebody like our team there for the mastermind group to be able to freeze the assets on an exchange and get them back to you. And then the fifth largest mistake that I see most people make deals with their family and inheritance. Okay, so not having a succession plan, not having crypto in your will, not having crypto in your trust, it just causes a big problem later on if you were to pass away and other people don't understand how to get the access to these assets. You don't want your crypto to die with you. And you also don't want it to get taxed super heavily with inheritance tax or estate tax. Creating an inheritance plan that's either too complex or too simple also causes problems. It needs to be very easy to execute on the other side of nobody likes to talk about death, but we're all going to pass away at some point, and God forbid, that happens sooner than later. But it is something that you need to think about, especially if you are holding larger amounts of these assets and you want your family to benefit from them. You need to make sure that these things are in place sooner than later. And you also want to educate family members. A lot of times, your spouse or your kids, they just have no idea about any of this stuff. They don't understand basic crypto security, and they don't know what to do when an emergency happens. So ideally, again, you wanted to diversify some of that information, maybe across multiple parties, and give multiple people some pieces of stuff so that they would have to put it together in order to be able to execute a transaction. But if you're doing that, they're going to make sure that, they are able to access these assets on the other side of your passing, and that your family is going to have the long-term benefit of your investments and not be squandered or lost just because you didn't take these precautions. Also, again, in the will, if you have the seed phrases in there, you need to make sure they know how to use them. I've seen a lot of people just list their seed phrases and expect that family members should figure it out. Before I moved my assets into the trust and the institutional custody, I had a crypto buddy that I trusted that was listed in my will with his phone number that would be able to help my family in a situation. And I let them know, hey, I've listed you in this will, and my wife will be reaching out to you because she's not going to have any clue what to do. You need to really trust that person, though. And again, maybe, you're their crypto buddy as well. But you need to have these precautions in place. Otherwise, it's a recipe for disaster. And if you don't update your inheritance plan as your crypto holdings grow and your family situation changes, this is a living document, right? So again, a living will, the revocable trust, there's things that need to be updated on probably an annual basis, or at least reviewed. A lot of people just don't do that. They do it one time, they set it, forget it, they hope that it's going to work. Your children grow older, you may have a situation where you no longer like a certain family member. That's one of the questions I always ask in my consults with people, which seems like a silly question, but there's frequently situations where people don't want to deal with the rest of their family, and they don't want certain people to have access to stuff. I get it. Things happen, but you need to be reviewing that on a regular basis. And assuming that your traditional estate planning attorneys are going to understand crypto and the recovery of these assets and how to manage them is not true. Good luck finding good estate planners out there. And again, that's why we provide the resources we do at Digital Ascension Group. We have, I don't want to say cornered the market, but we have a lot of really good people that have knowledge of this asset class and how to properly structure your estate planning and mitigate risk of loss on the succession plan for our clients. So if you need those resources, again, you can always reach out to us at digitalfamilyoffice.io, or you can just email us at info@digitalfamilyoffice.io, and we're happy to connect you with the best in the business when it comes to setting this up for you and your family. Now, let's talk about the specific strategies you need based on how much crypto you actually own. And keep in mind, the portfolio size that you have right now is not going to be the same in 2 years. So you'd rather be ready for when you go from 4 to 5 figures to 6 to 7, and make sure that you understand where and what to do when that situation plays out for you and your family. So let's talk about the smaller portfolios. And again, not throwing shade or being disrespectful. We deal with clients from end to end. Doesn't matter where you are, we meet you there. So we're going to talk about portfolios somewhere between, $1,000 up to $50,000. And that might be your whole life savings. And it could turn into a much larger amount. So again, not dogging anyone. We're just going to talk to this area for your current investments. The foundation of crypto security starts with choosing the right hardware wallet. And again, after testing all the ones in the market, we've chosen Decent as our partners for that. So if you want to get a decent cold wallet and move your assets off of the public restroom or the exchange and move it to your own private, wallet where you're holding and have full responsibility of those assets, and you can mitigate risk of loss at the exchanges, just go into the comments, go check out the links below, and they'll be right there to be able to get you access to that Decent wallet. And full disclosure, we're an affiliate. We make like $5 when you buy one. But again, I want people to have access to the best resources out there. And based on everything that we've seen, we've chosen Decent for a lot of different reasons. It offers the best security through biometric authentication that makes transaction signing both more secure and user-friendly. I like using a thumbprint. It makes it simple. I don't have to type in a code every single time or do all the other crazy stuff that some of the wallets require. It does have, a code that other people can access stuff if they know what the code is. So again, God forbid something happens to you, you don't have to chop your thumb off and you can get it to use your cold wallet. There's another way to access it. You never want to use, pre-generated seed phrases if you're buying from third parties. Always generate new ones directly on the device when you set it up. And for, Decent, I like the fact that they can add a 25th word for the seed phrase. It adds a little bit extra security layer that most people don't know about. And that 25th word should be kept separate from the written down of the 24 words that you put on a piece of paper. It's just, again, an extra layer of security, and, keeping that separate allows you one more layer before people can take your stuff. You also want to consider the battery life and connection. Bluetooth enabled wallets last about, a month long on the battery life. So just make sure it stays charged if you do want to be able to access it. I also like Decent because it's got a very large UI and screen. It makes it super simple to be able to transact and do the stuff that you need to for, a large portfolio of assets. If you have just a few assets, there could be better options for you out there. But if you have, 5, 6 investments, this is a really good way to be able to get everything in one device and makes it super simple. They have the largest breadth of assets of, a lot of the wallets out there. And again, the UI is awesome. So if you want to take advantage of the multi-asset support, modern wallets can hold dozens of different cryptocurrencies and even NFTs. So let's talk about the seed phrase and the backup security. Well, you want to write those seed phrases down on metal plates, ideally. But if you are going to use paper, you want to use multiple pieces of paper and probably even multiple plates also. Because again, if there's a wildfire in your area and it burns up your safe and it burns up the plate, it's gone. I would have redundancies. I would store a backup at home in a fireproof safe, and then I would have another one in like a safety deposit box, or maybe buried somewhere where it's there. When I had my stuff in my personal possession and not on the institutional platform that we use now with Anchorage, I had 12 different wallets and had to keep up with 36 different seed phrases, pieces of paper. And a lot of those were, in a couple different properties in case one burnt down or the other one burnt down. Might have one with a parent, might have one, again, safety deposit box, or again, buried somewhere where people can access it, or where it is so that other people can't access it. Again, you never want to take screenshots of any of this stuff. It needs to be written down somewhere or on that metal plate. The other benefit of the metal plate is ink's going to fade over time. And if you're, writing it down on paper, you want to make sure that you're going back and going over that occasionally just to make sure that it's not fading. And again, like there's just a lot that goes into this. If you are going to maintain this over an extended period of time, you probably also want to consider splitting your seed phrases. You want to keep, like I talked about, maybe that 25th word separate of everything else, or you could you could tear it in half and do 12 one place and the other 12 another place, and that's 24 total, and they got to be brought back together in order to be able to recreate a wallet. That's another way that you can decentralize, between family members, access to this stuff in the occurrence of your death. This is also how people were doing trusts before we got the institutional custody set up, where there's multi-sig on the wallet. You would, tear your keys in half and give your distribution trustee half your keys, and you have to recreate the wallet each time you wanted to take the assets out or do something with them. Very cumbersome and scary. And now that we have the institutional custody, this is much, much cleaner and much, much easier. You may also, I've seen some people go as far as creating decoy seed phrases with small amounts of crypto in that wallet to be able to throw off potential thieves. I think this is a little overkill, but it is something that I've seen people do and a way to be able to set yourself up for success if you do have large amounts of crypto. I'll say this and reiterate it again later, but I didn't ever keep more than like $250,000 on one wallet. I thought that, any more than that is kind of like FDIC insurance. You probably want to separate that out into another account. Some of the other best practices here are going to be using separate emails exclusively for crypto that have strong two-factor authentication enabled. This seems like redundancy and overkill, but I'm telling you, if it helps you keep your crypto and manages your risk so that you don't lose it, you're going to be very happy you did it. You also want to keep your crypto activities completely private. Don't post this stuff online like we talked about before. You don't want anybody else to even know that you have digital assets or these investments. I know a lot of people want to help their friends and they have conversations and they say, hey, you should look at this stuff. You probably want to get into it. I think it's going to be very valuable. But the more private you can be, the better off you're going to be in the long term, because the more people know what you have, the more potential problems from creditors and other people looking to get what you have could arise later, especially after it appreciates. You also might want to have a dedicated phone or computer like we talked about that's separate from everything else, just to make sure that there's no malware or keystroke software on that device. It doesn't have to be anything crazy expensive. Could be a couple $100s for a laptop that you use. And again, you want to be on a secure network that has firewalls when you're accessing that stuff. You definitely don't want to be on a public setting accessing your crypto wallet. So that's it for the 1,000 to 50,000 in digital assets. It's probably going to just be one crypto wallet. Again, we recommend DCET. The link is in the description below. And if you've got multiple assets, it's a great option for that. Now, what about if you have a little bit more? What if you've made some investments during the bear market and those have appreciated? Now you're sitting somewhere between 50 and 300,000 in your digital asset portfolio. At this level, it's a really good idea to go ahead and set up a digital asset LLC. This isn't really playtime anymore. You're past the point of just this being a hobby or speculation. This is probably becoming a more serious part of your portfolio. And single points of failure become your biggest enemy. And you need legal protection alongside the technical security that we're going to talk about. So again, you want creditor protection. The best and fastest way to be able to do that is to set up a Wyoming LLC. If you want to work with us to do that, that's awesome. I would recommend working with an attorney that knows what they're doing on this stuff. If it's not us, we do everything end to end for you for $2,000 if you use the code 50OFF, 50OFF LLC, and get you everything end to end that we're going to talk about. So that's the setup of the digital asset LLC. We set up a holding company that manages alternative investments with a specific sleeve for digital assets. And this provides a bulletproof legal and operational protection that also optimizes taxes later on. You're going to get charging order protection there in Wyoming because of the jurisdiction and how we set this up. Asset protection that separates personal wealth from digital assets, other ventures could, really save you if there's a potential liability. So you don't want to stick this. I see people say, okay, well, I've got an LLC for a rental property. You don't want to put it in there. You don't want to commingle these assets with another LLC that has potential liabilities and could open those assets up to being taken in a lawsuit if there are creditors or a lawsuit against the services portion of that business. This also gives you professional credibility with banks and exchanges and other business partners who prefer dealing with established legal entities. If you're doing KYB, if you're setting up accounts, moving large amounts of money to a business account is going to look a lot less fishy than moving it to a personal account, especially if you haven't ever had, 6, 7, 8 figures moved through your bank account before. That's going to throw up alarms for banks. If you're doing it through a business entity and you've told them and you've got, one of the private client accounts at one of these banks, it's going to make it much easier in that transition. And it's a lot less likely to get frozen or flagged when you do take large profits or start cash flowing off of these digital assets. It also optimizes taxes, right? So you're going to be able to take advantage of deductions and strategic income planning and the estate planning benefits that this is going to provide. An LLC is a great starting point. It gives you the most flexibility over the long term. It sets yourself up for success with creditor protection today. Again, I just haven't found a better way to be able to structure things off the jump for people, especially in this range of the 50 to 300,000 in digital assets versus an LLC here in the US. Now, if you're international, that could be a limited company in another jurisdiction. It could be an LLC in another jurisdiction. You probably want to talk with a professional in your jurisdiction on how the wealthy structure things there. And it may be a little bit more expensive than what we charge here. We normally charge about $4,000, but again, if you use the code that I said before, 50 off 50 OFFDALLC, everything end to end, including the corporate veil maintenance for our clients for $2,000. And this is a part that I see people make mistake on frequently, and that's going to be the operating agreement. Okay. Some people are going to set you up a trading LLC. That's not what you want. You're not going to get the benefit of long-term capital gains. This needs to be a holding company that manages alternative investments with sleeve for digital assets, and it needs to have the provisions for digital assets inside of that operating agreement so that they are managed, secured, and you can transfer under various circumstances. If you don't have those things in there, you're not operating correctly or legally. This is also going to be enhanced privacy and anonymity because we followed in Wyoming. You're going to get attorney-client privilege. So any public documentation that's out there is not going to have your name or your address on it. Makes it very difficult for people to figure out who is associated with the entity and with these assets. So Wyoming is fantastic for 1, no state taxes, 2, the charging order protection that you get there in Wyoming, 3, you're going to get anonymity because of the attorney-client privilege, and then last but not least, there's no state taxes there in Wyoming, and that can matter. You are going to have to file a foreign entity if you are in certain states. California and New York, they're going to get their piece. Okay. But a lot of the states are going to allow you the benefit of transacting business there in Wyoming and separating that out and mitigating some state taxes as long as those assets stay in the corporation versus in your personal name. You also get the benefit of filing as an S Corp potentially, as long as you meet the criteria required for that. So you get passed through taxation. You're not going to get taxed at the corporate level and then again at the personal level. It's just one-time taxation, and you are going to get the full tax code to be able to deduct a lot of those expenses and things that you do inside the LLC. In addition to that, as far as the security goes, this is where you might want to start separating out your hardware wallets and having multiple hardware wallets. Again, for me personally, I didn't ever like having more than $250 per cold wallet. It just, again, kind of coincides with the FDIC insurance. If you got 300,000, maybe you got, 3 cold wallets with 100,000 on each one. If you've got, more than that, we'll talk about some of the other ways that you can manage that later on. But you also might want to implement a multi-sig setup for additional security. There are certain wallets that allow for that. You could use dedicated devices exclusively for crypto transactions like we talked about before. You want to make sure this stuff's separate at this point for sure. And that you have, again, private connections to the internet that are not being monitored by somebody else. This is really the point where you also want to start documenting everything in a very secure way the beneficiaries can access without compromising your current security setup. So definitely want to have it in a will. Possibly, the LLC is going to provide you the creditor protection. You might also set up a living trust that owns the LLC so that you get the probate protection and you get both the benefits of probate protection and the creditor protection of the LLC. We work with people to do that. That's just $2,400 if you wanted both of those things. And again, you don't have to use us. I'm just giving you kind of ballpark stuff, what things cost. And again, if you've got at least 50 to 300,000 in your digital asset portfolio, 2,000, 2,500 bucks makes a lot of sense to continue to secure these assets, especially if you believe that they're going to appreciate over the long term. You also want to consider geographical distribution and backup of seed phrases across multiple secure locations in multiple cities. Like I said before, you might want to tear those seed phrases in half and give it, a portion to one family member or another family member to be able to recreate those wallets. And you would ideally have those in multiple locations so that it's not siloed and you have one single point of failure. You might also implement time delays on larger transactions to prevent immediate theft. Exchanges tend to do this. If they see, large amounts moving off of their platform, they will flag your account and do a compliance and risk review. Not your assets. You want to be able to move those anytime that you want. The more frictions and things that you put in place, the more cumbersome it is to move stuff around, but also the more protections that you have. And it's kind of a give and take on a lot of this stuff. You also might use different exchanges and services to avoid concentration risk of any single platform or company. Most people I know that do have, larger amounts of digital assets, they have somewhere between 4 and 5 wallets for, managing that one specific asset. And that could be exchange accounts and cold wallets or a hot wallet also. You're also going to want to start to conduct regular security audits of your entire setup, at least once a year, ideally like twice a year. It just becomes much more of a risk if you're not doing that for this amount of money. And as your assets continue to appreciate, it's going to become an even greater risk until you can get your assets into institutional custody. And that's really what we recommend for this next tranche right here. So once you're to an amount somewhere between 300 and 500,000 in digital assets in your total portfolio value, that's when we can start working with people and they can become clients of Digital Ascension Group and work with Digital Wealth Partners and Anchorage to be able to custody their assets. So that's, today XRP's $3. Our minimums are 100,000 XRP. So it's $300,000 in XRP or $500,000 in total portfolio value. And that could be a diversification across Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Matic, Chainlink, XRP, XLM, HBAR, and then many other EVM-based tokens. All of those are able to be custodied there at Anchorage. So if you have, at least $500,000 across all of those assets, we would love to work with you and provide institutional custody. And this is really the level where it gets pretty serious and you get access to all the benefits the institutions already have access to. So institutional custody solutions become much more cost-effective and time-effective and are really necessary for a portfolio at this size. You want professional-grade security systems. You want cold storage facilities, and you want operational controls with multiple layers of protection when your assets get above $500,000 in total portfolio value. It's kind of like stock certificates. Like if your stocks, you had a couple of them and you're holding the certificates, it's probably not that big a deal. But if you had a bunch of stock certificates and you had a large portfolio, you don't want to be holding those in your safe. And nobody does that at this point anyway. And that's effectively what you're doing with these digital assets. You want them held at the brokerage in an FBO account, which is for the benefit of you own it. It's segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured, separated out. And that way, the assets are yours and there's not going to be an issue if, one of these institutions does have a problem. So understanding that when you transition from self-custody to professional custody, it really just becomes crucial for long-term wealth preservation. You're going to want the insurance coverage and you're going to want the regulatory compliance that an individual investor can't achieve alone. Most of the time, to be able to get access to institutional custody, you're going to need a portfolio of at least $25 million. That's where they start to take you serious. Unless you're working with Digital Wealth Partners. And then again, we bring that threshold way down to just $500,000 in total portfolio value. And that can be across traditional assets and your crypto. So I just want to make that clear. If you have at least $500,000 in your total investment portfolio, and even if a small portion of that is crypto, and it's one of the cryptos that I mentioned, we can work with you. You would just need to bring your traditional portfolio over along with the digital assets, and then you can do it all in one place. So we often see people that want to dip their toe. They're still skeptical of all of this, which is completely fair and understandable based on everything that's happened in the industry. We have a lot of people that do a hybrid approach. They'll have professional custody for the majority of their assets, but they'll self-custody still a small portion to keep that away just in case, they want to move, go, whatever. They want to feel some type of sovereignty, and many people have just gotten used to having those assets in self-custody for an extended period of time, and they understand all of these protections that they have already put in place to be able to mitigate the risk of loss, and they've been doing it for 5 or 6 years. They're very comfortable with that, and we're okay with that. There's not a problem with that. We are here for however much people need us for at Digital Wealth Partners and institutional custody at Anchorage. But you also want to regularly evaluate your crypto custody providers and check out their security risks and track records and financial stability. We feel very confident about Anchorage, and that's the reason we chose to partner with them. They're an OCC federally chartered bank. They're the only one right now in the U.S. Ripple's applied for that license. We'll see if they get it. But just to give you the vote of confidence and the reason that we feel super comfortable is we watched BlackRock move all of their ETF holdings from Coinbase over to Anchorage. They wouldn't do that unless they felt like this was the best solution that exists in the US. And we'll continue to add additional custodians over time to be able to mitigate risk. Because again, you don't want to be able to hold all your stuff in one account. That's a single point of failure. So we'll, over the next 12 months, we will continue to add custodians to be able to diversify across them and hold your assets with multiple custodians to diversify that risk, and also get access to other products and solutions that we're building out to be able to generate yield returns and to be able to borrow against your crypto. So let's talk about the sophisticated legal and financial structures that you need once your assets are over $500,000, 300,000 to 500,000 in total portfolio value. You want multiple entity structures like LLCs. You might start looking at a trust at that point. Again, we talked about a living trust. It could be owning the LLC. The wealthiest people in the world own nothing and control everything. You might also want to start looking at, geographical distribution and backup across multiple countries. This is probably, once you're over the $1 million mark, which we'll talk about next, but this is again, just a good practice to get into if you are, starting to get into the 6-7 figures for your portfolio. You want professionals to help you with legal and tax advisory. You need these teams at this point to be able to mitigate risk of loss. The largest cost for most people that are wealthy is taxes. So you need the right people to help you mitigate that stuff. And you want to establish relationships with people that are crypto friendly, that understand these things. And that can, be the advisors, or it could be institutions. And that's again why we use Anchorage, and a lot of the partners we use is because, many people have been debanked over the past 4 or 5 years during the previous administration for dealing with crypto. If you're dealing with this asset class, you want to make sure that your partners understand it and are friendly to it. And lastly, you're going to want insurance policies to cover your digital assets with comprehensive risk protection. So we offer crime insurance there at Digital Wealth Partners in Anchorage, up to $100 million on the accounts. They're all segregated, bankruptcy remote, never commingled. You want, insurance on your assets. You want recourse. You want that protection if your portfolio value gets to this point, and especially into the future as it continues to grow. All right, so let's talk about the ultra high net worth clients that we have. They're north of $1 million in their total portfolio for digital assets. This is where partnerships and structures become imperative. You need to be looking at potentially pooling resources with other sophisticated investors to mitigate cost. That's again why we provide the solution that we do at Digital Wealth Partners and Digital Ascension Group. If you're going to pay for all these people independently, it's going to start to rack up. It's going to be substantial. And that's why family offices often, single family office doesn't even start until, you have 100 million in total portfolio value, because if you're paying $1 million to $2 million a year, you can do that across all those professionals to just work for you and your family. If you're pooling those resources, those costs come way, way down. And that's where multifamily offices come in. And that's what we are at Digital Ascension Group. We're a multifamily office. We're looking to reduce costs and create cost savings for families that are holding larger amounts of digital assets while providing a full scope of private client services. So on the wealth management side, just kind of going back here, the multi-sig piece of this and the governance around your account becomes, again, much more imperative at this point, especially if you have trusts involved. If you have an asset protection trust, you're going to have a distribution trustee that's going to need to sign alongside you or your spouse. And over certain amounts, you may want 3, 4, 5 people to sign, depending on how much money you're moving and what you're doing with it. You're going to also need sophisticated estate planning, right? You might want to look at foundations or trusts or multi-generational succession protocols with insurance. And again, right at $1 million, you probably don't need these things, but as it continues to climb to 10, 20, 50, $100 million, that's where these things, again, become imperative. And you definitely want to start looking at them now and understanding what they are before your portfolio climbs to those amounts. You're going to also want integrations with traditional wealth management structures and legacy financial planning systems. We do all of that. We have Addepar, we have bill pay, we have the accounting through Soft Ledger that also does, your crypto. We provide all of these services in one bespoke package for our clients, where you can view everything in one place. And that's, again, the benefit of, working with us early on is as you need these additional services, we already have the partnerships and the team to be able to provide you with those. And again, we always want to add value. We're not trying to replace anybody. You may have people that you've already worked with in the past on this stuff, and we can just provide advisory on digital assets. We're not trying to replace or take anybody's business. We always just want to be a value add at Digital Ascension Group. But you need professional teams that are comprehensive in their understanding of digital assets to be able to provide the protection in the financial planning for this asset class. And most of the time, the other professionals that you've worked with, they just have stayed away from it because of the lack of legal clarity around it. They've been told it's too risky, it's for money laundering, it's all these things. And they just don't have the expertise to really guide you in a comprehensive manner to manage, all these different protocols and potential emergency scenarios that could play out with this technology and these assets. They just don't have the understanding of them to even be able to begin to help you. And that's where, our professional services can provide a lot of benefit. So, again, I'm not trying to sell you on everything for Digital Ascension Group. If you want to, you can do what I did, which I called across the U.S. to over 100 different firms and whittled it down to the 10 people I worked with to set myself up for me and my family. But it does take a lot of time and a lot of resources, and you do have to understand everything at scale to be able to, really discern if somebody is a BSer or they really know what they're doing. And if you don't want to take all the time for that, you've tried to package everything in one place and build trust and do the right things that are very high standard to be able to create a one-stop shop and solution for everybody that, holds large amounts of digital assets and wants all these benefits. So in closing, protecting your crypto isn't just about buying the right hard wallet. It's about implementing the right strategies for your wealth to grow over time and having the proper legal structures in place, along with surrounding yourself with the right people who understand the complexities of these assets and all the other, nuances that could go along with it. The best time to implement proper security was when you first bought your crypto. But the second best time is right now. So you don't want to wait until you're dealing with a life-changing amounts of digital assets to get it right. You want to start building the correct habits, legal structures, and security systems today, because in crypto, there are no do-overs. When you get it wrong, and you lose your assets. And again, I've seen this over and over again working with our clients. They just made one little mistake or one little error, or they just were ignorant about one little thing and they didn't know what to do, or they didn't put things in place when they should have. And it cost them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. One of our clients lost $30 billion because they thought that they were buying an asset on one platform and it was not that asset. And they ended up losing everything that they had invested. So if you're new to this asset class, again, I would encourage you to reach out to professionals, especially if you're dealing with large amounts of money, and work with them directly, or just dip your toe. Don't risk the whole thing. Most people we're talking to, they're only investing somewhere between, if they're a family office, 0.5% up to 5% of their total portfolio is in digital assets. And I think that that's a very respectable way to do it. You're not betting the farm on it. But you're also getting exposure, and because it's an asymmetric bet, it could make a big difference in your long-term portfolio valuation and your long-term wealth for your family. So if you want the in-depth analysis and information on how you can secure your crypto step by step, even depending on your location globally, we have a ton of people in the mastermind with over 7,500 members that are in other jurisdictions like Canada, South America, Japan, the Middle East, Ukraine. We have people in the UK, the broader EU, and a lot of people in Australia that we all help, create partnerships and get them to the right professionals in their jurisdiction to begin handling this the right way for the amount of assets that they have. So if that sounds cool to you, you can either reach out to digitalfamilyoffice.io through an email. Just go to, send the email to info@digitalfamilyoffice.io, or again, you can join the mastermind. You can use the code BEYONDBROKE, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO gets you the first month there in the group for $2 in Carbon One. That's going to get you access to everything. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you, do these things now? Have you set yourself up correctly? Was there anything in the video that you thought was helpful or that you're not doing that you need to be doing? Let me know in the comments. And again, if you found value in this, please like, subscribe, share it with somebody else, and we'll see you guys on the next one.